All right. Good evening from the art den. Just getting everything set up here. We've been trying to get this thing working all day. Apologize, this is a trial run. A late night. We've been working on this fender all day, as well as setting up this account. So, if any feedback, please let us know. We are new to this. Alright. Now we are airbrushing a Harley Davidson fender. We are using House of Color. We're using House of Color white, a bunch of candy, a couple different brands of candy actually. Radiance brand, PPG, as well as the House of Color candies. Now, everything on here has been pretty much free-handed from start to finish. I did use a stencil to mark out my sizing of everything. I wanted to make sure that my feathers were going to fall into the right place. My skull was going to be about the right size, so I did use a small stencil to mark where my eyes were going to be, where my nose was going to be, the edge of my jaws, and where the top part of the headdress was going to start. So from there, everything else I have come back in and I have free-handed, and I have built the image basically from white forward. We've been laying down a white base for the base artwork. You can see that more on this side. I have kind of done this thing in a couple different stages, so people that are tuning in can see the different stages of the work that we do, and how the freehand work is done here at Prime Time. I'm training Lauren to do the same method, so we're trying to get a nice platform for how we do images, but it's always changing because every time I do something, I always find some new way to do it, or I get a piece of advice from someone who makes me think twice about the way I do things. So you're always learning. But you should always try to have a general idea of how you're going to attack your piece. You'll find you'll get a much better overall product in the end. So I'm gonna start getting into the paint now. Feel free to throw down a comment. Please hit the subscribe button if you wanna see. We are gonna be doing a lot more video content. We're going to be painting a lot more than just bikes coming up in the near future. We will be doing some pretty custom pieces coming up here. So feel free leave comments. Anything you guys want to see me paint, I would love to get some feedback and some ideas. What you guys want to see me challenge with, and yeah. So feel free to hit subscribe, and any questions, let me know. I'll try to answer my best. Alright, here we go. Now, what we're going to do here is I want to work in the brow here on his face. I've left this undone intentionally because I was going to come back in later, and I wanted to leave this section just for the simplicity of doing a live. I wanted to leave kind of the finalizing of this area for the live stream. So this is where we're going to be working. We are going to be coming in here. We're going to be filling in the rest of his brow, kind of giving it a little bit more shape, giving him a little bit more of an expression. Right now he's kind of got more of a flat look to him, and I do want to kind of push the depth of that brow back just a little bit more. Hopefully the audio is good. We did do a trial run earlier, but we're still making sure all the bugs are out of this. And yeah, so feel free again, leave some notes in the comments. All right, so here I'm going to be grabbing my airbrush, and we are going to start roughing in a little bit of detail into the brow. Now I am using a Badger Patriot Extreme. I'm using that for my all my white work. I like the way the white flows from the Badger Patriot. It seems to flow just a little bit better than when it goes through my microns when I'm dealing with white. White's such a thick color. I've got some pretty cool stuff coming up in the near future. We are going to be getting into doing some custom tables. We're going to be working with Stone Coat Epoxy out of the States. It's going to be a pretty cool little venture that we're going to get into. I've got a couple custom pieces we're going to be doing up. I want to get a little bit more back into my roots where I started. I want to do a lot more in the way of wolves. Some more nature pieces. I love doing the sinister and I love doing the realism, but I want to get back into enjoying the softer side of airbrush. Now you can't see, I am looking at a reference image just on my monitor, and I'm just trying to establish that bone. I have come in with a brown candy, and I have tinted the skull to have just a little bit of a shade of brown. Worked the color back and forth quite a bit to get it where it's at now. All in all, I've got probably about 2 days into this fender between laying down everything and getting everything where it needs to be to this point. It's about 2 days. Now, I'm actually not just laying down an even spray pattern. I'm actually kind of pulling my trigger back and forth, and I'm actually working the paint onto the surface with little different patterns, and this is kind of giving that effect of all those little porous bone textures. If you really look at skulls, they're smooth, but they've got a really kind of a swirly look to the bone. So we recreate that with the airbrush, and it kind of creates a nice effect for a texture, I find anyway. If any of you are interested in learning or starting airbrush, I definitely say I'd recommend looking up Maple Airbrush Supplies out of Alberta. Just got everything you're going to need to get started. She's got all the supplies. She's got all the tools, all the paint. She's been there for me ever since I started. So if you're interested in doing this, it's a beautiful craft. It does take a lot of patience. It does take a lot of time, and there's a lot of times you want to throw your airbrush across the room. But if you can avoid the temptation of doing that, and you like a challenge, airbrush is a great way to vent. Now I'm just bringing that texture pattern into the brow a little bit more. And the reason I do this, and I do this in layers, is because when you're dealing with candies, you can really push the depth of your artwork, because the candy is very transparent, so it does pick up on all the different layers and all the different textures that you put into it. And even though you might not see it on the camera, there's bone texture underneath the browns where I've come in on earlier, and you can still see that, and you won't really see it until you hit this thing with clear. And when you do, all those little subtle changes in tone will just pop, and it'll just bring the thing to life. Now this bike is on a Harley Davidson Heritage Classic, and it will be touring around the Ontario region pretty soon, so you can keep your eyes out for it if you're from around here. And right now we're just really hammering down the final details. We will push this back again with the brown candy. But these are things I find that I'll look at as a piece as I go through, and I may be working this section, and I'll kind of jump back and forth, because as I work a piece, you kind of become numb to it. So by taking your mind and you jumping somewhere else, when I come back to it, something may jump out that wasn't really apparent when I was burying all the color, or I was trying to establish a hard edge, or I was trying to establish a roll, or establish kind of more of a smooth bump. instead I'll get lost in trying to do my texture, and I'll maybe miss a shape or whatnot. So now I'm kind of coming back, and I'm just reestablishing any areas that I wasn't maybe happy with to begin with. And because I work with 3 airbrushes, I can actually work in an area and push and pull my colors so that I can get the overall effect pretty fast. The problem is, because I'm doing it freehand, there's a lot of times where I'll do a piece and then I will bury some of that artwork because I won't like the way it's sitting. And I'm not someone to just say, oh well, that's the way it is. I'll go back and I'll change it 17 times if I have to. People don't understand that, because something I don't think a lot of artists really explain to clients, that as an artist, as much as this isn't like going to Walmart. Can't press print and it all of a sudden pops out. So as an artist, you want to be happy with it as much as the client does, and sometimes that means you gotta do it a couple times or fight with an area to get it just right. When you first start, I think the biggest thing and biggest challenge you run into is learning not to be afraid to work your piece. I think when you're first starting, you get kind of twitchy about working an area that you're kind of happy with, because you think, oh, if I work that just a little bit too much, I'm gonna screw it up, and I'm gonna have to start again. Now it's just, I've gotten to a point that if I screw it up, I know within 15 minutes, 20 minutes, I could probably fix it, because I know I've inner coated where I needed to, and I've followed my steps and my process enough that I can achieve or fix any mistakes within about 15-20 minutes of my working session. And if not, black, it's like the permanent eraser. If you have to do it, you gotta do it. I hate going that method, because black, it loses all the time you spent putting in your textures. So if you can save something, black is your last resort. Now I'm going to be going and doing a how-to tutorial, YouTube tutorial, coming up on an upcoming piece. I have not yet decided the piece. I keep going back and forth between a couple different options. I remember when I first started, I was so afraid to work with white. Because I fought with it so much. Thinning it down was a big challenge to learn. white. I'll mix white with a tone to try to establish kind of either a warm or a cold tone in my artwork. I'm going a lot more warmer tones on this one. I do have a little bit of more cold tone on the one side of this, because this whole piece has a lot of meaning to the owner. So a lot of the colors speak to his relationship with his son and with his wife. So we're doing a yellow for his son, blue for his wife. His wife will have one side of the bike, his son will have the other. He's going to have a lot of yellow tones on towards the one side, and he's going to have a lot of blues on the other. Standard browns, whites, and some other subtle blues and tones buried within the piece. But for the most part, it'll follow this kind of platform. I've got a Indian style dream catcher that will be going on to both sides of the tank, and another skull with a Canadian leaf on the forehead, and then we've got a bunch of feathers we're going to be doing on there as well, and it's going to be a pretty cool piece. And then we've got a little bit of a surprise going to be going on the rear. We're not going to talk about that one on the live feed because that one will be completely done off the books and will be a final reveal only for the client, as it does hold a bit of a touching sentiment for him. So I want to save that surprise for him upon the drop off. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come in and we're going to establish more of the browns. I like the effect this has had in bringing the whites forward. That was bad. I've been having issues with my Micron. And that was one of those issues. The needles staying open. So this is a really good learning thing. So you have to let it dry, because if you touch it, there's reducers and everything that's going to be in there. You don't want to mess with that. So I want to try to let this dry. Do its thing. It's in an okay area, but we've got to let it do its thing. I've got a few choices. I could turn it into damage. I could turn it into a bunch of different effects, but we're gonna get rid of it. These things will happen when you're dealing with freehand art. It's one of those challenges. I said I could fix things pretty fast. Alright, so we've got a bit of a problem, because when you hit that thing with a ton of paint like we just did, you're gonna have a tiny bit of a rough surface. Now, I really hate to do this because this is not pretty, but you do have to sand it. Now I'm using a 1000, and it's still a little bit wet, so we're not going to hit it too hard yet. Normally I'll hit it with an inner coat first. but I don't have a lot of free airbrushes right at the moment. Actually, you know what? I could probably use this one. What we'll do is we're going to hit this with a bit of an inner coat first. The inner coat will allow me to sand this a little bit cleaner. Inner coat is sandable. Normally I use my mask when I'm spraying this stuff, but for the sake of the camera, I'm not. Now you can't see it at all on the camera, what I'm adding, because what I'm spraying on here is completely transparent. But the reason I'm doing it is because by spraying this down, I've left a little bit of a bumpy ridge, okay? You're gonna see that bumpy ridge through the paint on top layers if I don't get rid of it. By me spraying this completely transparent paint over top of it, I'm creating a bit of a surface that I can kind of just sand down a little bit to give me a nice flat surface, which won't show through on my next coat. So I've got to kind of get rid of that first and foremost. You learn that through years of mess ups. They happen. It's artwork. Tools mess up. I've been going for 12 hours already, so my airbrushes need to be cleaned. I should probably call it a day. I'm exhausted, but I work a full-time job now and paint in the evening, so I have to take advantage of every day that I get off, and today I was given the day off because we were a little bit ahead, and I want to take advantage of getting this thing done. Now this is a pretty good thing. Now I'm not consistently spraying this on. It seems like I am, but I'm also releasing my trigger and I'm air drying it while I'm doing this. And it's already going to be dry because I'm putting it on so thin. But all those grooves and all that ridging is nice and gone now as well. So it's buried it, which is exactly what we want to do. Now I will have to touch up a few things in here, but it's not the end of the world. Some of my best changes came from screw-ups. Also some of my worst days. So we're going to come in first and we're going to start to try to bury this. Nice thing is that inner coat made it pretty nice and smooth, so I might not have to sand it at all. I'm trying to take a leap of faith. It looked good. It felt really, really smooth. I'm sure under a microscope it's not going to be as smooth, but we will be doing an inner coat clear over everything, and then on top of that we'll be doing a full clear. We'll be wet sanding everything down, and then I'll be going back and doing any touch-ups or any repairs that I'll have to do before we do our final clear anyway. I like that method. You can get it perfectly nice and smooth. Much nicer finishing touch in the end. This guy was in the bullets, I probably would have turned that into a bullet hole. That was pretty well shaped for a bullet hole. But we're not really going with bullets for this piece. Now I am just working the whites just in the texture of the bone. I'm saving myself some work. Now I will have to, because of the screw up, I will have to come back in and I'll probably blend this out quite a bit, and then I'll push in my darks back over it once again. You can always tell when you start having trigger issues where your airbrush isn't doing exactly what it is that you need it to be doing. That's when you need to stop pulling your trigger. When you're first starting, you don't realize it. And that's when you start to wrestle with your trigger, and what happens to this happens. You can still see, because I'm not just flood coating this, you can still see it slightly. But I don't really need to get rid of the entire thing because it kind of adds a little bit of a texture underneath. And if you're smart about how you do it, you can actually utilize a blotch or a pattern like that in your textures. And you might have to modify it a little bit, but it's all about saving time. Yeah, you screwed it up, but can you make it worth it? I remember when I first started, I would have made a mistake like that. Would have been like, oh my god. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm coming back in now with that brown again. And I'm doing exactly what I did with the white, but I'm doing it in reverse. With the candy. I'm pushing that texture back into the browns. Now let's fight with me a little bit. And whenever you are dealing with a little bit of a fight, a little drop of reducer to help loosen that fight up. Again, I've been having some issues with the microns. The needles are sticking. It's the O-rings in the back get kind of sticky after so many hours. It's almost like a suction happens. If you know how to fix that, let me know. I can fight with that. It's a new thing I've been dealing with. Okay, so here we go. So now I'm starting to lay down that reverse tone. The thing was, I was going to do this step anyway. I was just not going to need to do all that white work. But it is what it is. And there you go, you've got most of it gone. I do see a little bit of it, but we will get rid of that. Now with candies, you want to seal what you're doing with your inner coats. You're going to be coming over with an establishing color, white. Whites will be a little bit more vibrant. It'll establish a little bit better when you're not spraying straight over the candy. Have come in with quite a bit of candy in here, so it needed a good one over. That inner coat is great for filling in. By doing this, if I need to fix any surface issues, I can do that, knowing that I'm not having to sand or scuff or scrape or erase or anything on my actual artwork or paint. So as you can see, our big blotchy mark is gone. I'm just coming in and I'm adding little tiny dots. And the reason I do that is it establishes these little, it's almost like a trick to the eye. It gives your work almost this high definition feel when you have these really sharp dots worked in. Obviously where they need to be. If we did that on someone's skin, they would look blotchy. But on bone, they work perfect. And just another level of depth and detail. You don't have to do this. It's really up to you how much detail you want to go when it comes to your textures. I love trying to make my textures look more and more real. Challenge people that want to touch your piece, just to see if they feel your ridge, or feel a transition, or expect to feel a bump. Just because your work was so detailed, right? It's a great feeling as an artist. Awesome. Alright, we're going to call it there. And we're going to continue on this piece tomorrow. And we'll get all these feathers hammered in tomorrow. It'll be a long day trying to get those feathers done. But I'd like to try to get this thing all hammered out so that we can get onto the tank by the end of the week. Alright, thanks for everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate it. If the audio was bad or whatever, please let us know. Leave a comment. Let us know what you want to see me airbrush. What you guys want to learn how to paint. Alright, thanks for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate it. And you guys have a good night. We'll do some more videos and modify our content over time. So, thanks again, guys. Prime time out from the Art Den.